The harsh winds howled across the Apache territory, much like the grief that had hollowed out Nita's soul. 5 winters had passed since she buried her husband and children. 5 winters since her own people had turned their backs on her. Now she lived alone in a dwelling carved into the red cliffs, far from anyone who might witness her tears. Her days were spent in silence, gathering herbs and watching eagles soar above the vast, indifferent landscape. At night, she would sit by a small fire, convinced that her story had already ended. But fate had other plans. Would an unexpected knock on her door during the season's worst storm change everything she believed about second chances? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Nita's fingers traced the rim of her clay medicine bowl, its surface worn smooth from generations of healers before her. In the flickering firelight, the carved symbols of her ancestors seemed to dance along its edgehawk for vision, bear for strength, river for life's journey. Once, this bowl had been filled daily with remedies that healed her people. Now it sat mostly empty, collecting dust and memories. Before the shadows came, Nita had been the most respected medicine woman of her band. People traveled for days to seek her healing touch, her knowledge of plants, her connection to the spirits. Her husband, Tarak, had been the band's finest hunter, known for his ability to track game where others found nothing. Their twins, a boy and girl, Hakan and Tala, had been 7 summers old, their laughter the sweetest sound in their dwelling. That was before the raid. Nita closed her eyes. But the memories came anyway. The shouting, the gunfire, returning from gathering herbs to find smoke rising from their encampment. The soldiers had come while most of the men were away hunting. Tarak had died defending the children. The children had died hiding in their home when it was set ablaze. 23 souls lost that day. Only Nita and a handful of others survived. The grief spirit clings to you, the elder medicine woman had whispered weeks later, backing away from Nita's touch. Death follows where you walk now. The whispers spread through what remained of her band. Bad luck, cursed, touched by death. Even those she had healed for years now avoided her gaze. When children fell ill, after she treated them common fevers she had always cured, before the blame fell at her feet. Your spirit is broken, the chief had finally told her. Until you find healing for yourself, you bring danger to us all. It wasn't banishment, not officially, but the message was clear. And so Nita had gathered what remained of her possessions and walked away from the only community she had ever known, heading into the high desert cliffs where the ancient ones had once dwelled. The cave dwelling she found had been abandoned for generations, its walls still bearing the faded handprints of people long gone. It had taken months to make it livable, clearing debris, repairing the stone walls, creating storage for the coming winter. The solitude suited her grief. Here, no one flinched at her approach or whispered behind her back. Now her days followed the rhythm of survival. Wake before dawn, check snares for rabbits, gather firewood and water from the hidden spring, collect plants for food and medicine, old habits that persisted even when there was no one to heal but herself. Watch the sky, listen to the wind, sleep, begin again. The eagle feather necklace that had been Tarak's hung around her neck always, a weight and a comfort. Sometimes, in the moments between waking and sleep, she imagined she could feel his spirit near her. Other times, she was certain she heard Tala's laugh carried on the breeze, or Hakan's footsteps outside the dwelling. Foolishness, she would mutter to herself. The dead are gone. Yet each night, she spoke to them anyway as she sat by her fire, telling them of her day as if they sat across from her, listening. It was a ritual that kept her sane in the crushing silence of her exile. The approaching storm had been building for days. Nita had prepared, as she always did, extra firewood stacked inside, water containers filled, food stored where animals couldn't reach it. The first heavy raindrops struck the stone outside her dwelling as she added another log to her fire. Thunder rolled across the sky, and for a moment Nita could almost hear Tala's voice. Her daughter had always been frightened of storms. The sky spirits are just moving their furniture, she would tell the child, holding her close until the fear passed. Now there was no one to comfort but herself. Lightning flashed, illuminating Nita's dwelling in harsh white light. The storm had grown fiercer than any she'd witnessed this season. Wind howled through the canyon, carrying with it the scent of rain-soaked earth and something else, something that made the hair on the back of her neck rise. Smoke. Nita moved to the small window, cut into the stone, and peered out into the darkness. Another flash of lightning revealed nothing but sheets of rain and the twisted forms of juniper trees clinging to the cliffside. Yet the smell persisted, faint but unmistakable, gunpowder and burning wood. Just memories, she told herself, turning away. The past often played tricks on her senses. An owl's call pierced the storm's rauthery, haunting notes that made Nita freeze. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. When death owl calls 3 times during storm, the spirit world thins, changes come. Such superstitions had once guided her life. Now they were just another reminder of all she had lost: faith, community, purpose. She busied herself with practical matters, checking that no rain leaked through her carefully constructed roof, adding herbs to the stew bubbling over her small fire. The dried cedar and sage hanging from her ceiling swayed in the draught, releasing their protective scent. The owl called again, closer this time. Nita found herself reaching for the obsidian knife she kept nearby, another habit from her former life. As her fingers closed around its handle, a vision flashed behind her eyes. A small figure running through rain, blood mixing with mud, terror driving each step. The vision vanished as quickly as it had come, leaving Nita breathing hard. She hadn't experienced such sight since before the raid. The spirits had been silent to her for 5 long winters, deaf to her pleas for guidance when she needed them most. "Too late," she whispered bitterly to the empty air. "I no longer need your warnings." Yet something pulled her to her feet, toward the entrance of her dwelling. She secured the heavy leather covering against the wind and rain, then pressed her ear to it. Through the storm's fury, she heard something impossible: the distant crack of rifles. Not memory, not imagination. Real gunfire, carried on the wind from the valley below. Nita's heart raced. Soldiers rarely ventured this deep into the canyons, especially during storms. They must be pursuing someone. Another band, perhaps, fleeing to the high country as her people once had. "Not my concern," she told herself firmly, returning to her fire. She had sworn never again to involve herself in the troubles of others. Helping brought only pain. The storm raged on. Nita prepared her sleeping mat, though she knew rest would not come easily with the thunder shaking the very stone around her. As she unrolled the woven blanket, something clattered to the floor: a broken ceremonial knife she'd found months ago while gathering pinyon nuts. The knife was clearly Apache in design, though from a different band than her own. Its handle, carved from elk antler, depicted a thunderbird in flight. The blade had been snapped off near the hilt, rendering it useless as a tool but still heavy with spiritual significance. She had kept it, though she couldn't have explained why. Now she turned it over in her hands, feeling its weight. The thunderbird seemed to watch her with its intricate carved eye. A sharp crack of thunder shook the dwelling, so powerful that dust and small stones rained down from the ceiling. Nita coughed, waving away the dust, and in that moment she heard it, a sound so unexpected that at first she thought she had imagined it. A knock, faint but deliberate, at her door. Nita stood motionless, listening. It came again, 3 rapid taps, desperate and weak. No one knew of this place. No one should be out in such a storm. The owl called a 3rd time, its cry mingling with another thunderclap. Knife in hand, Nita moved slowly toward the entrance. She pulled back the covering and peered into the darkness. Lightning illuminated the small figure swaying on her threshold, a boy, no more than 8 winters old, drenched and trembling. His dark eyes, wide with fear and exhaustion, met hers for only a moment before they rolled back in his head. He collapsed forward into her dwelling. Nita caught him reflexively, feeling his burning skin against her arms. The boy was light too, light and hot with fever. Blood darkened his buckskin shirt along his left side. "Foolish child," she muttered, though her hands were already moving with practiced care, carrying him to her sleeping mat near the fire. Ancient instincts awakened as she examined his wound. A rifle bullet had grazed his ribs, tearing flesh but leaving the bone intact. Infection had set in, angry red lines spreading from the wound. 5 years of solitude vanished in an instant as Nita moved with the efficiency of the healer she once was. She cleaned the wound with boiled water, applied a poultice of crushed juniper berries and sage, and wrapped it with strips of clean cloth. Throughout her ministrations, the boy drifted between consciousness and fevered dreams, muttering words she couldn't quite catch. Bad men. Fire. Grandfather said run. Only when the wound was dressed did Nita attend to his other needs, stripping off his sodden clothes and wrapping him in her spare blanket. As she removed his shirt, a folded paper fell from a hidden Pokita crude map, its ink running from the rain but still showing military positions marked with small crosses. Nita stared at it, a cold feeling settling in her stomach. Why would a child carry such a thing? She set the rain-soaked map aside to dry and continued her examination. The boy was malnourished, but strong. He had survived alone for days, perhaps longer. Around his neck hung a leather cord with a small medicine pouch. In his hand, clutched so tightly she had to pry his fingers open, was the missing piece of the ceremonial knife she had found months earlier. The broken blade fit perfectly with the handle. The coincidence sent a shiver through Nita. Her grandmother would have said this was the spirit's doing. Nita was no longer sure what to believe, but the knife's completion felt significant in ways she couldn't explain. The boy stirred, his eyes fluttering open. He tried to speak, but could only manage a dry croak. "Water," Nita said, lifting his head to help him drink from a clay cup. He gulped desperately, then fell back, exhausted by even this small effort. "Tala," he whispered. The name of her dead daughter froze Nita's blood. "What did you say?" she demanded, but the boy had already slipped back into unconsciousness. Outside, the storm raged on. Rifle shots no longer carried on the wind, but Nita knew what they meant. Whoever had wounded this child was still hunting. By morning, they might track him to her door. "I should send you away when you wake," she told the unconscious boy, though even as she spoke the words, she knew she wouldn't. The healer in her, long dormant, had reawakened at the sight of his suffering. The mother in her, never truly gone, responded to his vulnerability. She placed a cool cloth on his forehead and settled beside him to keep watch through the night. His breathing came shallow and fast, his small body fighting the infection that raged within. "You are strong," she murmured, surprising herself with the tenderness in her voice. "Fight, little warrior." As darkness deepened, Nita found herself doing something she had abandoned years ago, praying to the spirits for another's healing. The familiar words came back easily, rising from some place inside her that had remained untouched by grief and bitterness. "Great Spirit, this child is not mine, but he needs strength. Guide my hands, show me the path to his healing." The wind seemed to answer, whistling through the canyon with a sound almost like distant voices. Dawn broke clear and cold after the storm. Nita had dozed fitfully beside the boy, waking at his every movement to check his fever. As first light filtered through the small window, she saw his eyes open alert now, though shadowed with pain and wariness. He scrambled backward when he saw her, pressing himself against the wall despite his wound. "Be still," Nita said in Apache. "You'll open your wound." The boy's eyes widened at her words, but his dialect when he responded was different from hers, the harder consonants and flowing vowels of the southern bands. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice cracking with thirst. "Where am I?" Nita poured water into a cup and offered it to him. "I am Nita of the Mountain Shadow Band. You're in my dwelling in the high cliffs. You came to my door in the storm, wounded and fevered." He took the cup cautiously, never taking his eyes from her face as he drank. "What is your name?" Nita asked. The boy hesitated. "Kim," he finally said. "It means thunder," Nita finished. A fitting name for one who arrives with the storm. Something in her tone must have reassured him, for his shoulders relaxed slightly. He glanced down at his bandaged side. "You healed me?" "I cleaned your wound. The healing comes from within you." Nita gestured to the ceremonial knife pieces, now joined on a square of leather near the fire. "This was yours?" Kame nodded, his face solemn. "My grandfather's. It broke when?" His voice faltered. "When the soldiers came," Nita finished for him. "I heard the rifles in the storm." Tears welled in the boy's eyes, but he blinked them back fiercely. They came at dawn. No warning. Grandfather told me to run to the mountains while he and the other men fought. His small hands clenched into fists. I should have stayed. I should have fought too. Then you would be dead, Nita said bluntly. Your grandfather wanted you to live. They're all dead, Keme whispered. Everyone. I hid and watched them burn our homes. They were looking for something, looking for me. Nita frowned. Why would soldiers hunt one child? Keme shook his head. Grandfather was the band's translator. He worked with the bluecoats sometimes. He said they did bad things, broke promises. He had papers. He trailed off, his young face troubled with memories too heavy for his years. Nita remembered the rain-soaked map. Papers like this. She showed him the partially dried map. Kame's eyes widened. Yes, Grandfather said to keep it safe, said it shows what they plan. Before Nita could question him further, Keem's stomach growled loudly. The sound so ordinary, so childlike cut through the tension. Despite herself, Nita felt her lips twitch in what might almost have been a smile. She ladled rabbit stew into a bowl and handed it to him. As he ate hungrily, she went to a small storage niche and withdrew a pair of tiny beaded moccasins crafted years ago for feet that would never grow larger. These will fit you, she said, setting them beside Kame. Your feet are cut from running. The boy stared at the beautiful moccasins, recognition in his eyes. These are for a girl. Yes. Nita's voice was flat. My daughter, she has no need of them now. Understanding beyond his years flickered across Keem's face. He touched the moccasins with unexpected gentleness. What was her name? Tala, Nita said, the name still painful after all these years. Last night, you spoke her name in your fever. Keme looked confused. I don't know anyone called Tala. The spirits sometimes speak through fever dreams, Nita said, then shook her head at her own words. Once she would have believed such things without question. Now she wasn't sure what to believe. She stood abruptly. Rest. When you're stronger, we'll decide what to do with you. Where will I go? Keem asked, sudden fear in his voice. Nita paused at the door. There's a friendly band 3 days' journey from here. Once you can travel, I'll take you to them. But as she stepped outside to check for signs of pursuit, Nita wondered if either of them would live long enough to make such a journey. Nita moved silently through the scrub brush, reading the land as easily as other people read tracks in sand. The storm had washed away most signs of passage, but her experienced eyes caught what others would miss: a broken twig here, a displaced stone there. She carried a notched stick used for marking and measuring tracks, a tool she had once used to teach her son about hunting. Near the hidden spring that supplied her water, she froze. Boot prints, partially filled with rainwater but still distinct. The heavy tread pattern of cavalry boots. At least 4 men, perhaps more, had passed through yesterday during the storm. They had stopped at the spring, then continued along the canyon floor. They hadn't found the steep, hidden path to her cliff dwelling, but they had been closer than comfort allowed. If they returned, a more thorough search might reveal her homand, the boy she harbored. Nita followed their trail for a short distance, confirming they had moved on toward the south. For now, they were gone, but soldiers rarely traveled alone in Apache territory. Others might come. When she returned to the dwelling, she found Kame attempting to stand, one hand pressed against his wounded side. Foolish boy, she scolded, easing him back down. The wound will take days to heal enough for walking. I heard something outside, he explained, his dark eyes serious. I thought they found us. Not yet, Nita said, but they were here at the spring below. We must move you somewhere safer until you heal. Fear flashed across the boy's face, quickly replaced by determination. I can walk. No, but I can carry you. There's a smaller cave higher up that few know of. Nita began gathering essential medicines, food, water skins, and a few crucial tools. We'll leave most things here so they won't know we've gone. As she packed, she explained what she had seen. 4 men, cavalry boots. They stopped to refill their canteens, then continued south. They're tracking something or someone. Me, Keme said quietly. The officer who led them, did you see if one has a red beard? Nita shook her head. I saw only their tracks, not the men themselves. The red-bearded one is their leader. Keme swallowed hard. He shot grandfather while grandfather was showing him papers. I was hiding, watching. Grandfather had told me to stay hidden no matter what. These papers, they're important? Keme nodded. Grandfather said they show the truth about what the Bluecoats plan for our people. Bad things. Nita secured the last of their supplies into a bundle she could carry on her back. We'll speak more of this later. Now we must move before they return. Despite his protests, Keme was too weak to walk far. Nita carried him on her back, his slight weight a reminder of how young he was to bear such burdens. The path to the higher cave was treacherous, a narrow ledge winding up the cliff face, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. In the smaller cave, Nita made Keme comfortable, then used a branch to sweep away their tracks from the path. By sundown, they were settled in the new hiding place, a fire carefully positioned to ensure its light wouldn't be visible from below. As darkness fell, Keme's fever returned. He tossed restlessly on the sleeping mat, crying out in his dreams. Nita bathed his forehead with cool water and sang softly healing songs she hadn't sung in 5 years. "Will they find us here?" Keme asked during a lucid moment. Nita showed him the tracking stick, its surface marked with notches and symbols. "See these markings? They tell stories of what walks the land deer with a limp, a fox carrying prey, a man with a stone in his boot. I'll teach you to read such signs when you're stronger. To know when danger approaches and how to hide your own trail." "Like a hunter," Keme said, his eyes brightening despite his fever. "Like one who wishes to survive," Nita corrected. "Rest now. Tomorrow will begin your learning, if your fever breaks." That night, as Keme slept more peacefully, Nita kept watch at the cave entrance. The quarter moon cast silver light across the canyon, revealing nothing moving below. Yet Nita couldn't shake the feeling that this was merely the beginning of a storm greater than the one that had brought Keme to her door. By the third morning in the higher cave, Keme's fever had broken, but a new problem emerged. The wound showed signs of deepening infection, the skin hot and swollen, with red lines creeping outward. Nita changed the poultice twice daily, but her usual remedies weren't working quickly enough. "It hurts more today," Keme admitted, his face pale with pain he tried to hide. Nita examined the wound with careful fingers. The deeper poison must be drawn out. She sat back on her heels, her decision made. "I need herbs from the lower dwelling. You must stay here alone for a time." Fear flashed in Keme's eyes, but he nodded bravely. From a small pouch, Nita withdrew an eagle bone whistle suspended on a leather cord. She placed it around Keme's neck. "This is very old, made by my grandfather's grandfather," she explained, showing him how to hold it. "If danger comes, blow once softly. The sound carries far, but in a way that human ears might mistake for a hawk's cry." She demonstrated the subtle technique, producing a haunting call that echoed briefly through the cave. "If you need me urgently, blow twice. Never blow 3 times unless your life depends on it. That sound will carry to the valley floor." Keme practiced until he could produce the correct sound, his small fingers careful on the sacred instrument. "I'll return before midday," Nita promised. "Keep the fire small and stay away from the entrance." The descent to her main dwelling was swift. Nita moved with practiced silence, every sense alert for signs of intruders. The dwelling appeared undisturbed, but something felt wrong. She paused at the entrance, listening. Silence. Too much silence. Cautiously, she entered. Everything remained as they had left it, yet the air felt disturbed, as if someone had recently been present. Near her sleeping mat, she found the evidence a single boot print in the soft earth, partially obscured, as if someone had tried to erase it. They had found her home. Working quickly, Nita gathered the herbs she needed and other essential supplies they might not be able to retrieve later. As she reached for her medicine bundle, a sound outside froze her in placemen's voices, approaching from the canyon floor. The first high, clear note from the eagle bone whistle drifted down from above. Keme had spotted them too. Nita slipped out the back entrance, see a narrow crevice hidden behind hanging cloth, just as boots crunched outside the main doorway. She pressed herself against the cliff face, inching along a ledge barely wide enough for her feet until she reached a juniper whose branches concealed a path upward. "Search everything," a man's voice ordered from inside her dwelling. "The boy can't have gotten far with that wound." Nita climbed swiftly, the medicine pouch clutched in her teeth. Halfway up, the second whistle call came more urgent. She redoubled her speed, ignoring the sharp stones that cut her hands. She reached the upper cave to find Keem pressed against the far wall, the whistle still at his lips. Through the narrow entrance, she could see what had alarmed him: 2 soldiers climbing the same path she had used days earlier to bring Keem here. They moved slowly, unsure of their footing, but they were coming. "They found the path," Keme whispered, his voice tight with fear. Nita pulled him deeper into the cave, where a narrow tunnel led to a secondary chamber. "This way," she murmured. "Move silently, as I showed you." In the second chamber, barely large enough for them both, Nita quickly mixed her strongest medicine: crushed juniper berries, sage, and a rare fungus that grew only in the deepest parts of the canyon. She spread the poultice on Keemy's wound, then bound it tightly. "This will burn," she warned, "but you must not cry out." The boy bit his lip as the powerful medicine seared his infected wound, but no sound escaped him. Nita watched his face with approval. Despite his youth, he had a warrior's heart. Outside their hiding place, boots scraped on stone. The soldiers had reached the cave entrance. "Looks abandoned," one voice said. "Could be an animal den." "Check inside," another ordered. "Captain says to be thorough." Nita placed her hand over Keem's mouth, though the gesture wasn't necessary. The boy remained perfectly still, his eyes wide but resolute. Together they waited, hardly daring to breathe, as footsteps approached their hiding place. The footsteps paused at the entrance to their hiding place. Nita could see the shadow of a man through the narrow opening, smell the tobacco and sweat on him. Her hand hovered near her knife. "Nothing but a dead end here," the soldier called back to his companion. "Too small for a person." "Check it anyway," his companion insisted. A rifle barrel poked into the opening, probing the darkness. Nita held her breath, pressing herself and Keem against the rough stone wall. The rifle withdrew. "Just rocks," the soldier muttered. "Let's head back before we break our necks on this cliff. The captain won't be happy." "He's never happy," the other replied. "Not since the boy escaped." Their voices faded as they retreated. Nita waited until no sound remained before easing toward the cave entrance. The soldiers were descending the path, their backs to her. She motioned for Keem to stay put while she crept to the main cave opening, watching until the soldiers rejoined a larger group at the canyon floor. "They're leaving," she told Keem when she returned, "but they'll be back with more men. We can't stay here." Despite the infection, the wound looked better after the new medicine. Keem sat up straighter, determination in his young face. "I can walk now. Where will we go?" Rain began to fall as afternoon faded into evening, washing away the soldiers' tracks, and Nita hoped any sign of their own passage. They waited until full dark before leaving the cave. Keem insisted on walking, though Nita kept a steadying hand on his shoulder as they followed a game trail higher into the mountains. "The rain is good," she explained as they picked their way carefully along the slippery path. "It covers our scent and our tracks." "Like the deer do," Keem said, remembering her lessons, moving during rain to hide their trail. Nita nodded, pleased by his quick learning. "The mountains grow steeper ahead. There's a place where 3 ridges meet that my people used in the old days when enemies approached. Few know of it now." By midnight, exhaustion overcame Keem's determination. Nita carried him the final distance to a small rock overhang where they could rest until dawn. She built a tiny fire, well shielded from view, and brewed pine needle tea to warm them. The rain continued through the night, gentle but persistent. As they huddled by the fire, Keem's head began to nod. Nita wrapped her blanket around him, watching as sleep smoothed the worry from his face, making him look even younger. While he slept, she fashioned a small doll from corn husks she had brought from her dwelling. Her fingers remembered the patterns her mother had taught her, weaving the husks into the form of a little warrior with a tiny bow on his back. When morning came, Keem woke to find the doll beside him. He picked it up with wonder, turning it in his small hands. "You made this? For me?" Nita nodded, surprised by the warmth she felt at his pleasure. "My son had one like it. It will watch over you when I cannot." Keem clutched the doll carefully. What was his name? Your son? The question caught her off guard. For years, she had avoided speaking her children's names aloud. Hakan, she said finally. His name was Hakan. It means fire in our language. And he died with your daughter, with Tala? Yes. Nita busied herself packing their few belongings, uncomfortable with the conversation. But Keem wasn't finished. My mother made me a doll too, before the sickness took her 2 winters ago. My father said it was foolish for a boy to carry such things. His voice dropped. I kept it hidden. Now it's gone, burned with everything else. He looked up at her, his eyes too old for his young face. Thank you for making me a new one. Something shifted in Nita's chest, a loosening of a tightness she had carried for years. She reached out hesitantly and brushed a strand of hair from Keem's forehead. The gesture felt both foreign and familiar. We should move, she said, her voice gentler than before. There's a long path ahead. As they continued their journey, Nita found herself watching Keem with new eyes. The boy had lost everything, just as she had. Yet somehow, he still found joy in a simple corn-husk doll. 3 days into their journey, the terrain grew more challenging. Jagged ridges rose before them, their paths narrow and treacherous. Though Keem's wound was healing well, the difficult climbs tested his endurance. Still, he never complained, matching his smaller steps to Nita's pace with quiet determination. At dusk, they reached a high plateau, offering shelter among wind-carved rock formations. From this vantage point, the vast landscape spread below them, canyon and mesa, forest and plain, painted in deepening shades of purple and gold as the sun descended. We've come far, Keem said, pride in his voice as he looked back at the distance they had traveled. And have far yet to go, Nita replied, unfolding a flat stone from her medicine pouch. The stone's surface bore careful carvings, dots and lines, forming patterns that might have seemed random to untrained eyes. Nita placed it on level ground and aligned it with the setting sun. This is how we traveled before the white man brought his compasses, she explained. My father's father carved this star stone when he was a young man. It has guided 3 generations of our family. Keem leaned close, studying the markings with fascination. The dots are stars? Yes, see this pattern? The 7 sisters, and here, the Great Bear. Nita traced the constellations with her fingertip. When darkness falls, the stone will show us our path. As stars emerged in the deepening blue, Nita taught Keem how to orient himself using the night sky. The boy proved a quick study, soon identifying key stars and their significance for navigation. The stars never change, he said, looking up with wonder, even when everything else is taken from us. Nita glanced at him, struck by the wisdom in his words. They change, but so slowly we cannot see it in one lifetime. My grandmother said that when we die, our spirits join the stars, watching over those we left behind. Do you believe that? Keem asked. That your children are up there, watching? The question would have angered her once. Now, Nita found herself considering it honestly. I don't know. For many years, I believed in nothing but survival. They fell silent, each lost in their thoughts as night fully claimed the sky. The peaceful moment shattered when Nita spotted movement on the plain below, torches, moving in formation. Soldiers, she whispered, pulling Keem back from the edge. They watched as the patrol moved systematically across the landscape, clearly searching. Nita counted at least 15 men, far more than had pursued them initially. They're still hunting me, Keem said, his voice small. Us, Nita corrected. They hunt us both now. They retreated deeper into the rock shelter, keeping their fire tiny and well concealed. Sleep came uneasily that night. Near dawn, Nita woke to find Keem trembling beside her, his eyes wide with terror from some nightmare. They were burning everything, he whispered when she touched his shoulder. Everyone was screaming. I couldn't move. Instinctively, Nita pulled him close, the way she once had with her own children after bad dreams. It was just a dream, she murmured, though they both knew it wasn't only a dream but memory. Will we ever be safe? He asked against her shoulder. Nita had no easy answer. We keep moving, we stay vigilant, we survive. When morning came, they faced a difficult decision. Their planned route now lay directly in the soldiers' search area. taking a longer path would mean crossing harsher terrain with limited water. Nita studied the starstone again, this time in daylight. "There's another way," she said finally, "through the Shadow Canyon. It's dangerous. Mountain lions claim that territory, and the path nearly disappears in places, but soldiers fear it. They call it haunted." "Is it?" Keme asked, his eyes wide. "All places where our ancestors walked hold spirits," Nita replied, "but these spirits protect their own." They set out as the sun cleared the eastern ridges, moving carefully to leave minimal signs of their passage. Twice they spotted distant patrols and were forced to hide motionless for hours. By nightfall, they had covered less ground than Nita had hoped, but they were drawing closer to the canyon's entrance. That night, as Keem slept, Nita kept watch, the star stone in her lap and her thoughts on the difficult path ahead. The stone had guided her ancestors through war and peace, famine and plenty. Now it would guide them through this darkness if they were strong enough to follow. Shadow Canyon lived up to its name. Towering walls of striated rock rose on either side, allowing only a narrow strip of sky above. Even at midday, much of the canyon floor remained in twilight shadow. The air felt different, heavier, charged with an ancient presence that Nita had not felt in many years. "This place feels like it's watching us," Keme whispered, staying close to Nita's side. "It is," she replied simply. "Our ancestors' spirits dwell in these walls." They had traveled half a day through the canyon when Nita paused at a seemingly unremarkable section of stone wall. Only on closer inspection could one see the faint red handprints pressed into the rock centuries before, and above them, the carefully carved symbol of a thunderbird. "A sacred place," Nita explained, removing a small leather pouch from her medicine bundle. "My people have left prayers here for generations." The sacred tobacco pouch was simple but beautiful, decorated with porcupine quills dyed with berry juice. Nita opened it carefully, showing Keem the mixture of tobacco, sage, cedar, and sweetgrass inside. "Each plant carries our prayers to different spirits," she explained. "Tobacco to Creator above, sage to cleanse our path, cedar for protection, sweetgrass to attract good spirits." Keme watched solemnly as Nita placed a small pinch of the mixture in a crack in the rock wall, then raised her hand in respect. "Can I leave an offering too?" he asked. Nita hesitated, then nodded, showing him how to take a small amount of the sacred mixture. "Speak your prayer in your mind as you place it." Keme closed his eyes in concentration as he made his offering. When he opened them, they shone with unshed tears. "I asked the spirits to watch over my family and to help us find safety." They continued deeper into the canyon until they reached a place where a small spring bubbled from the rock, creating a shallow pool surrounded by unexpected greenery. Here, Nita decided, they would rest. As evening approached, she performed a more elaborate ceremony, singing softly in the old language as she burned a small amount of the sacred mixture. The smoke spiraled upward in the still air. "My grandmother taught me these songs," she told Keme, who watched with rapt attention. "They have been sung in our family since before the Spanish came with their horses and their crosses." "My grandfather taught me songs too," Keme said. To Nita's surprise, he began to sing a different melody, but with familiar cadences that resonated with her own tradition. Their voices blended in the canyon twilight, echoing softly from the ancient walls. For the first time in years, Nita felt something within her respond to the ceremonial reconnection to the spiritual world she had abandoned in her grief. That night, they both dreamed. In the morning, they discovered they had seen the same visionary green valley nestled between twin mesas to the west, with a river running clear and straight as an arrow. "The spirits are guiding us," Nita said, unable to deny the significance. It had been 5 years since she had received such a clear vision. Keme nodded solemnly. "I've seen that place before, in dreams after my mother died. Grandfather said important dreams come more than once." They left the sacred site renewed, their path now clear, but the journey would not be easy. As they neared the canyon's end, Nita spotted fresh tracks in the damp earth near the spring-knot soldiers' boots, but wide, heavy prints with 5 toes and sharp claw marks. "Mountain lion," she whispered, pointing to the tracks. "A large one, and not alone." They moved with heightened caution, Nita keeping Kime always within arm's reach. Near midday, a distant bellowing sound stopped them in their tracks. "Buffalo," Nita said, recognizing the distinctive calls. "A large herd. They must be in the valley beyond the canyon mouth." When they reached the canyon's exit, they found their path blocked. Hundreds of massive buffalo moved across the plain, raising dust clouds visible for miles. To attempt crossing would mean certain death beneath countless hooves. "Now we wait," Nita said, settling behind a large boulder. "The soldiers won't cross that herd either." Keme watched the magnificent animals with awe. "My grandfather said that when the buffalo return in strength to our lands, the old ways will be reborn." Nita studied the boy's profile, seeing wisdom beyond his years. "Perhaps they already are," she said softly. The buffalo herd passed by nightfall, leaving the plain trampled but clear. Nita and Keme continued westward, following the vision that had come to them both. 3 days later, as they crested a low ridge, they spotted thin smoke rising from a sheltered valley. "People," Keme said, tensing. Nita studied the smoke pattern. "Not soldiers. Their fires burn differently. This is a small settlement, perhaps a trading post." They approached cautiously. Hidden in the brush at the valley's edge, they observed the cluster of buildings below a main cabin with attached trading room, a stable, and several smaller outbuildings. A garden plot flourished near a small stream. "I know this place," Nita said, surprise in her voice. "The trader is called Jacob. He was fair with my people, even when others were not." "Can we trust him?" Keme asked, skepticism evident in his young face. "No one is fully trustworthy in these times," Nita replied, "but we need supplies and information." They waited until dusk before approaching. A woman was hanging laundry behind the main cabinot, white, but Pueblo, her long dark hair braided down her back. She spotted them first, calling out something in her language to someone inside. A tall, bearded white man emerged, a rifle held casually but ready. His weathered face showed surprise when he saw Nita. "I know you," he said in halting Apache. "Mountain Shadow Band, the healer woman." Nita nodded. "I traded with you. 3 summers past." The man lowered his rifle slightly. "Heard your people met trouble. Didn't know any survived." "Few did," Nita replied simply. The trader gestured toward his cabin. "Come, Sarah makes stew. You look hungry." Inside, the cabin was a curious blend of white man's furnishings and native crafts. 3 children clearly of mixed heritage watched the newcomers with wide eyes from a corner where they had been playing with carved wooden animals. The trader's wife, Sarah, served rabbit stew and corn cakes without question, her dark eyes kind but cautious. Only when they had eaten did Jacob begin his inquiries. "Army's been through twice this month, looking for Apache, offering rewards." Nita's hand moved instinctively to her knife. Jacob noticed and shook his head. "Not our way. We trade with all who come in peace." "The soldiers," Nita said carefully. "What do they want?" Jacob exchanged glances with his wife. "They say renegade Apache raided settlements." He looked pointedly at Kem. "But they seek a boy, one who witnessed something he shouldn't have." Keme stiffened beside Nita. Sarah spoke quickly to her husband in Pueblo, then addressed Nita in careful Apache. "My cousin trades at Fort Silwell. He says a red-haired captain seeks a boy who saw papers about the new reservations. True plans, not what they tell the chiefs." From a shelf, Jacob took down a small object and handed it to Nita, silver trade mirror in a simple wooden frame. "For your medicines," he said. "My youngest had fever sickness last winter. Your remedies might help if it returns." Nita accepted the mirror, understanding the real offer information in exchange for her healing knowledge. She reached into her pouch and withdrew several small packets of herbs. "This for fever, this for cough, this for stomach sickness," she explained, showing Sarah how to prepare each one. As the women talked medicine, Jacob spoke quietly to Keem, who had been examining a small carved horse one of the children had offered him. "The soldier with red hair, Captain Bishop, bad man, killed 3 Pueblo men last spring. Said they attacked first. They didn't." Later, as Sarah showed Nita her garden of medicinal plants, the Pueblo woman whispered, "Your former tribe Mountain Shadow Band, they were forced to the new reservation 3 moons ago. Few resisted. Those who didn't survive. The news hit Nita like a physical blow. Despite their rejection of her, she had never wished harm on her people. That night, given shelter in a small storage room, Nita studied their faces in the silver mirror by lamplight, her own lined by grief and hardship, but somehow changed in recent days. And Keme's young, but marked by wisdom beyond his years, his eyes holding both sorrow and hope. "We leave at dawn," she told him. "The trader has given me a new path to follow westward, but through forest rather than open land. Soldiers rarely patrol there." "Because of mountain lions?" Keme asked. "Because of ghosts," Nita replied. "The place where many of my people died when I was a child. White men avoid it. They say it's cursed." "Is it?" Nita's reflection looked back at her from the silver mirror, her eyes dark with memory. "Only for those with evil in their hearts." They traveled for 2 days through pine forest, so dense that at times the sun barely penetrated the canopy. The trader's directions had been good. A barely visible trail wound through the wilderness, marked occasionally by small stone cairns left by native travelers over generations. Near sunset on the second day, Nita froze, raising her hand for Keem to stop. The scent carried on the breeze was unmistakable death. "Stay close," she whispered, drawing her knife. They moved forward cautiously until they reached the edge of a small clearing. What they found made even Nita, who had seen much death, draw in a sharp breath. 8 Apache men lay scattered across the clearing, their bodies left where they had fallen. From their dress and weapons, Nita recognized them as hunters from her former tribe. They had been dead for perhaps 2 days. "Wait here," she told Keme, who had gone pale at the sight. Nita approached the nearest body, examining it with the detached precision of one accustomed to death. The man had been shot in the back at close range. She moved to the next, finding similar wounds. "They were executed," she said, her voice tight with anger, "not killed in battle." Near the center of the clearing, she found something that made her blood run colder, military badge that had fallen from a uniform. She picked it up, studying the insignia, a cavalry officer's rank, from the same unit that had attacked Keme's village. When she returned to Keem, he identified it immediately. "That's like the one the red-haired man wore," he said, his voice barely audible. "Captain Bishop." Nita's mind raced. These men were from her former tribe, supposedly already on the reservation, according to the trader's wife. Yet here they were, dead in the forest. She searched the bodies methodically, looking for anything that might explain their presence. On the eldest hunter, a man she had once known as a tribal council member, she found a folded paper tucked inside his shirt. A map of the reservation, with markings she didn't understand. More disturbing was what she found clutched in the hand of another manor silver button from a military uniform, as if he had torn it from his attacker in the struggle. The man's other hand still gripped his knife, its blade darkened with dried blood. "They fought back," she said, returning to Keem, "and at least one soldier was wounded." As the sun set, Nita performed abbreviated burial rites for the men, unable to properly bury them but unwilling to leave them without spiritual protection. Keme helped in solemn silence, gathering stones to place on each man's chest according to Nita's instructions. They made camp far from the clearing, neither willing to sleep near so much death. As they sat by their small fire, Nita studied the map taken from the dead council member. "This shows the reservation," she explained to Keme, "but these markings in red, they show something else, places outside the reservation boundaries." "What places?" Keme asked, leaning closer. "I'm not certain, but look here," she pointed to several circled areas. "These are old Apache sacred grounds. And these," she indicated squares marked with X's, "might be mining sites. The white men have long sought gold and silver in these mountains." Keme's eyes widened. "My grandfather was angry about mines. He said the soldiers promised there would be no digging on our lands, but then he found men with machines near our sacred spring." Nita remembered something the boy had said earlier. "You mentioned your grandfather had papers. What kind of papers?" "I don't know exactly. He was teaching me to read the white man's words. He showed me papers with many names and a big seal. He said it was a treaty, that it protected our lands." Kemi's face darkened. "But then he found other papers in the captain's tent. He took them. That's when the soldiers came." The pieces began to fall into place. Your grandfather discovered something about their plans for the reservations, Nita said slowly. Something they didn't want known. Is that why they killed everyone? Kemi asked, his voice small. For papers? Nita looked at the military badge in her palm, then at the map with its mysterious markings. For land, for gold, for power. She closed her fingers around the badge. The same reasons they have always killed our people. She made a decision. Tomorrow we change our course. We must find the nearest free Apache band and warn them. What happened to your village and these hunters may be happening to others. But the soldiers are looking for us, Kemi protested. Yes, Nita agreed grimly. And now we know why. You may have seen more than you realize, Kema. Something in those papers that makes you dangerous to men like Captain Bishop. Dawn revealed something Nita had missed in the fading lighter satchel, half hidden, beneath one of the fallen hunters. Inside she found what appeared to be a letter, but unlike any she had seen before. The words were English, but arranged in a nonsensical pattern. I cannot read this, she said, frowning at the strange document. It looks like words, but they don't make sense together, Kemi agreed, peering over her shoulder. Nita studied the paper more carefully. Her husband Tarek had learned to read English during his time as a scout for the army, before disillusionment led him back to his people. He had begun teaching Nita before his death, and she had continued learning from books, traded from passing settlers, determined to understand the enemy's language. This is a code, she realized suddenly. Tarek told me soldiers sometimes wrote messages this way to keep secrets. She remembered his explanation of a simple pattern read every third word to find the true message. When that yielded nothing, she tried every fourth word, then second. There, she murmured as a pattern emerged. Laboriously, she extracted the hidden meaning. Reservation lands hide rich deposits. Government treaty being violated. Tribes to be moved again once consolidated. Witnesses eliminated. Bishop authorized. No survivors. Keem watched her face. What does it say? Nita chose her words carefully, shielding him from the most brutal details. It confirms what we suspected. The government is placing all Apache on reservations not to protect them, but because valuable minerals lie beneath those lands. Once all bands are confined, they plan to move them again or worse, leaving no one to oppose them. Like they did to my village, Kemi said, understanding beyond his years in his dark eyes. Yes, your grandfather discovered this plan. That's why Captain Bishop killed him and your people. Nita folded the paper carefully. And why he still hunts you. But I didn't see any papers, Keem protested. I was just hiding. A memory surfaced in Nita's mind, something Keem had mentioned days ago but seemed insignificant then. You said you were hiding when your grandfather showed the papers to Captain Bishop. Where exactly were you hiding? Keem's brow furrowed in concentration. In grandfather's meeting lodge, behind the bearskin, I could see through a small hole. And could you see the papers? The boy nodded slowly. Some of them, they had drawings of mountains and valleys, and marks like on that map we found. Grandfather was pointing at them and speaking angrily. What else do you remember? Think carefully. There was a big paper with many names. Grandfather kept pointing at it, saying the captain had broken faith, and another paper with numbers, so many numbers in rows. Nita's heart raced. The treaty and mining surveys, you saw them clearly enough to identify them. The captain asked where grandfather found the papers with numbers. Grandfather wouldn't say. The captain got very angry. Kemi's voice dropped. That's when he shot grandfather. I wanted to scream, but grandfather had made me promise to stay hidden no matter what. Nita knelt before the boy, gripping his shoulders gently. Kemi, you are the only witness to what happened. The only person who could testify that Captain Bishop murdered your grandfather, unprovoked and stole treaty documents. But who would believe an Apache boy? Kemi asked bitterly. There are some who might, Indian agents who still have honor, newspaper writers from the East. Nita wasn't certain of this, but the possibility existed. More importantly, you can identify the papers if they're found. Your evidence that can't be erased. Understanding dawned on the boy's face. That's why they keep hunting me. Yes. And now we know something else important. There are other Apache who know about this plan. She indicated the coded message. These men were carrying this to someone. We need to find out who. Nita made a decision that changed everything. We're not running anymore. We're not just seeking safety. She tucked the coded message into her medicine pouch. We're going to find the people these men were trying to reach and help them expose this plan. Keme straightened, something new in his expression purpose replacing fear. Like warriors. Like truth. Bringers. Nita corrected, though she couldn't help but feel pride at his courage. But first, we need to understand exactly what you saw that day. Every detail could matter. As they continued their journey, now with new purpose, Keem described everything he could remember about the papers, the meeting lodge, and the confrontation that had cost his grandfather's life. With each detail, Nita's understanding of the conspiracy grew clearer and the danger they faced more evident. Their new course led them to the edge of a vast, open, plain dangerous territory for those who wished to remain unseen. Cavalry patrols could spot movement for miles across the golden grasslands that stretched toward distant mountains. The Sky Knife Band camps near the Twin Buttes, Nita explained, pointing to two distinctive flat-topped formations shimmering in the distance. 3 days' journey across open land. Can we go around? Keem asked, eyeing the exposed terrain with apprehension. Nita shook her head. That would add many days. The message must reach them quickly, before more hunters die. She led Keme to a secluded hollow where a small seep provided fresh water. Here, she unpacked a special bundle wrapped in rabbit skin clay pots containing earthy pigments in red, black, and white. War paint, she explained, mixing the clay with a small amount of bear fat. My husband taught me the warrior patterns of our band. Keem watched with fascination as she applied the paint to her own faced lightning streaks across her cheekbones, black circles around her eyes, white dots along her forehead. The red confuses the eye at dawn and dusk, she explained. Black absorbs sunlight when we must hide in shadow. White breaks the outline of the face when we move by moonlight. She painted Keem's smaller face with similar patterns, adding a thunderbird symbol on his forehead protection for one born during storms. We will cross by night, she continued, tucking the paint pots away. Sleep during day. I will teach you to move silently through grass taller than your head. Throughout the day, as they rested in the hollow, Nita trained Keme in the skills they would need. She showed him how to step, placing the outer edge of the foot first, then rolling in water technique that left minimal tracks and made almost no sound. Watch how deer move, she instructed. They freeze at any sound, becoming invisible by stillness. She taught him signal hand gestures that would allow them to communicate silently across distance. 1 raised finger meant danger, 2 meant hide, a closed fist meant freeze. If we're separated, she said, use the eagle bone whistle only in greatest need. Otherwise, find the North Star and continue toward the Twin Buttes. As sunset approached, Nita retrieved a final item from her bundly small pottery jar sealed with pine pitch. Inside was a dark, greasy substance that smelled of earth and herbs. This will mask our scent, she said, applying it to Keem's skin and clothing, so dogs and horses won't catch our smell downwind. The boy wrinkled his nose but didn't complain. As twilight deepened, they prepared to leave their shelter. Keem surprised Nita by kneeling on the ground, his head bowed. My grandfather prayed before hunting or war, he explained. He said warriors need the spirit's protection. Something stirred in Nita's heart. Without thinking, she knelt beside him, placing her hand on his small shoulder. Together they sat in silence for a moment before she found herself speaking the traditional prayer she hadn't uttered in years. Great Spirit, guide our steps. Ancestors, shield our passage. Mother Earth, hide our tracks. Father Sky, cover our movement with your darkness. They set out as the first stars appeared, moving like shadows through the tall grass. Nita led, with Keme following precisely in her footsteps. The quarter moon provided just enough light to see without exposing them fully. Near midnight, Nita froze, raising her closed fist. Keme instantly became motionless. In the distance, torches moved in a straight linear cavalry patrol, crossing the plain from east to west. They remained perfectly still until the lights disappeared over a ridge. They covered good ground that first night, reaching a shallow ravine where they could safely rest during daylight hours. As dawn broke, Nita spotted dust on the horizon. More soldiers, she whispered. Many of them. Through the morning, they watched from their hiding place as multiple patrols crisscrossed the plain. This was no random search pattern. The soldiers were systematically covering the territory between them and the Twin Buttes. They know where we're headed, Nita realized with a chill. Someone has betrayed the location of the Sky Knife Band. Keem's painted face was solemn in the morning light. What do we do now? Nita studied the distant patterns of movement, her mind racing. We must warn them, but we can't cross with so many patrols. She pointed to a line of low hills to the north. We'll go that way tonight, longer but safer. As Keem finally drifted to sleep, exhausted from the night's journey, Nita remained watchful. In her dreams the night before, Tarak had appeared to her for the first time in years, standing on a ridge, much like the one they now sought. The vision felt like more than longing or memory, it felt like guidance. The northern route proved arduous but effective. By the third night, they had circled around the heaviest patrol activity and reached a high ridge overlooking the approach to the Twin Buttes. From this vantage point, the entire plain spread before them in the moonlight. What they saw confirmed Nita's worst fears. In the shadows of a rocky outcropping halfway between their position and the buttes, the moonlight occasionally reflected off metal rifle barrels and buttons. Soldiers waiting in ambush, positioned along the most direct route any Apache would take to the buttes. They're expecting the Sky Knife Band to pass through there, Nita whispered, or anyone trying to reach them. Through gaps in the clouds, she could make out small cook fires near the base of the Twin Buttes, the Sky Knife encampment, unaware of the trap laid for them. We must warn them, Kem said, his painted face grim in the moonlight. Yes, but we can't reach them before the soldiers would spot us. Nita reached into her medicine bundle and withdrew a carefully wrapped package. We'll send a message they can see from a distance. The signal fire bundle contained specially prepared material cedar bark, soaked in pine resin, dried sage, crushed juniper berries, and powdered minerals gathered from specific locations. Each ingredient, when added to fire, would produce distinctively colored smoke visible for miles. My people and the Sky Knife share this signal language, Nita explained as she arranged the materials. White smoke means greeting, red means danger, green means stay in place, blue calls for gathering. She selected a location where the ridge formed a natural chimney. The smoke would rise high before dispersing, but the fire itself would remain hidden from the soldiers below. With practiced movements, she built a small, nearly smokeless fire using dry twigs. Keep watch, she instructed Keme. If you see movement on the plain, signal me immediately. When the fire burned hot, Nita added the first mixture white cedar bark that produced thick white smoke rising straight into the still pre-dawn air. 3 white puffs greeting and identification. She waited, watching the distant camp. After several minutes, an answering white puff rose from near the buttes. They had seen her signal. Next came the warning grid smoke from powdered ochre and specific resins, released in a pattern of 2 short puffs, then 1 long stream. Danger approaching, many enemies. The response was immediate, single red acknowledgement from the camp. Then activity, the cook fires were being doused. They understand, Nita said with relief. Now we show them where the danger lies. She created yellow smoke next, pointing in the direction of the hidden soldiers. The Sky Knife would now know exactly where the ambush waited. But as she prepared the final signal green smoke to advise them to stay in place until nightfall, Keem's urgent whisper interrupted her. Movement. On the plain. Nita froze, following his pointing finger. A cavalry patrol, previously unseen, was moving along the base of the ridge directly below their position. The smoke from their signal fire, while visible to the distant Apache camp, had also attracted unwanted attention. They've spotted our smoke, she said, quickly smothering the fire. We need to move now. They gathered their belongings swiftly, but before they could retreat from the ridge, a shout echoed from below. Up there, on the ridge. A rifle shot cracked, the bullet splintering rock near Kame's head. The boy ducked instinctively as Nita pulled him behind a boulder. They've seen us, she said, scanning the ridge for an escape route. We need to draw them away from the buttes, give the Sky Knife time to escape the trap. More shouts came from below as soldiers began to ascend the ridge. Orders were being called. The patrol below was signaling to the larger ambush force. "This way," Nita said, leading Keme toward a narrow game trail that wound down the backside of the ridge. "We'll head for the canyon lands. They won't follow us easily there." As they fled, Nita caught a glimpse of movement from the twin buttes. The Skyknife were breaking camp, moving away from the direction of the ambush. Their warning had worked, but at a cost now. They were the hunted. They reached the bottom of the ridge as the first light of dawn broke across the eastern horizon. Behind them, soldiers crested the ridgeline, pointing in their direction. "Run," Nita urged, knowing their painted faces would be clearly visible in the growing light. "The rocks are our only hope." Ahead lay a maze of sandstone, former Siansa place, where the earth had been carved by ancient waters into a labyrinth of narrow passages and hidden chambers. If they could reach it before the mounted soldiers caught them, they might yet survive. They reached the maze of sandstone just as hoofbeats thundered behind them. Nita pulled Keem into a narrow crevice, barely wide enough for an adult to squeeze through. The painted symbols on their faces now served a different purpose, helping them blend with the red-orange stone surrounding them. "Stay close," she whispered, leading him deeper into the labyrinth. Voices echoed off the stone walls as soldiers dismounted, unable to follow on horseback. Orders were shouted they would be pursued on foot. The passageway widened slightly before branching in 3 directions. Nita hesitated, then chose the middle path, which descended steeply into shadow. As they moved deeper, daylight faded, replaced by an eerie half-light filtering from above through narrow fissures in the stone. "I can't see," Keme whispered, his hand gripping hers tightly. "Feel the wall with your other hand," Nita instructed. "The stone will guide us." The passage twisted and turned, sometimes so narrow they had to turn sideways to continue. Behind them, shouts and occasional gunfire echoed. The soldiers were searching methodically, firing into dark openings to flush out their quarry. The path suddenly opened into a large chamber. Watery light spilled from a hole in the ceiling far above, illuminating ancient paintings covering the wall's hand prints, hunting scenes, and spirit figures created by people long vanished. "Old ones lived here," Keme breathed, staring at the pictographs in awe. Nita scanned the chamber quickly, noting 5 different exits. Which to choose? The soldiers would eventually find this room and check each passage. Her eyes were drawn to one particular pictograph, a series of zigzag lines leading to a circle with wavy lines inside it. A river. "There," she said, pointing to the darkest passage, the one that descended most steeply. "That one leads to water." As they started toward it, a shout echoed from the passage they had just exited. They had been followed more closely than she realized. "Run!" Nita pushed Kime toward the chosen tunnel. They plunged into darkness as a rifle shot cracked behind them, the bullet ricocheting off stone. The tunnel floor sloped downward at an increasingly steep angle. They half ran, half slid through the darkness, guided only by their hands on the rough stone walls. The air grew cooler, damper. The sound of flowing water reached them, growing louder with each step. Behind them, bobbing lights appeared. Soldiers with lanterns had entered the tunnel. Voices echoed, distorted by the stone passage. "I see them, down there." Another shot rang out, closer this time. The tunnel ended abruptly at a ledge overlooking an underground stream. The water flowed swift and dark through a channel it had carved over millennia, disappearing into a low passage at the far side of the cavern. "We have to cross," Nita said, gauging the distance, perhaps 15 feet to the opposite ledge. Keme stared at the water with undisguised fear. "I can't swim." "We'll jump together," Nita said, though her own fear of deep water made her heart race. Her people believed that water spirits could pull the unwary to their deaths. The lights behind them grew brighter. They were out of time. "Trust me," Nita said, gripping Keem's hand firmly. "On 3, 1, 2... A rifle blast echoed through the cavern. Pain seared across Nita's upper arm as the bullet grazed her flesh. She staggered, but kept her footing. 3! She leaped, pulling Keme with her. They landed hard on the opposite ledge, Keme nearly slipping back into the water before Nita yanked him forward. Without pausing, they plunged into the low tunnel ahead as bullets struck stone around them. The new passage twisted sharply, taking them out of the soldiers' line of fire. It continued downward, the floor now slick with moisture. The sound of rushing water grew to a roar. "I smell fresh air," Keme said, his voice barely audible over the water noise. The passage widened suddenly into another large chamber, this one dominated by the underground river, which emerged from one wall and disappeared through a low opening in the opposite side. Daylight filtered through a crack in the ceiling, illuminating the chamber enough to reveal ancient carvings on the walls maps of the underground passages. "Look," Keme pointed to a series of symbols showing a human figure following the river to an exit. "The old ones left guides for those who followed," Nita said, studying the carved map. "The river leads out, but—" She fell silent, seeing what the carving depicted next: a sharp drop, a waterfall. Behind them, voices echoed again. The soldiers had found a way across the water chamber. "We have no choice," Nita said, looking at the dark water flowing swiftly into the low passage. "We must follow the river." Nita worked quickly, stripping bark from roots that had penetrated the cave ceiling. She wove the flexible strands into a crude but serviceable raft, just large enough for Keem. "I can't leave you," the boy protested when he realized her plan. "You won't. I'll swim alongside." Nita tied the last knots, then reached into her medicine pouch. From it, she withdrew a small bundle wrapped in deerskin herbs gathered at dawn, strands of her own hair, a hawk feather, and a pinch of earth from where they had first met. A medicine bundle for protection. "Hold this against your heart," she instructed, placing it in his hands. "The spirits will guide us through the water." Shouts echoed closer. No more time. "Now," Nita pushed the small raft into the current with Keme clinging to it. She slipped into the cold water beside it, one hand gripping the edge, the other pulling them forward. The current caught them immediately, sweeping them into the low passage. Nita barely had time to draw a deep breath before the ceiling dropped, leaving only inches of airspace. Keme pressed his face into that narrow gap, eyes wide with terror as darkness enveloped them. The passage seemed endless, the roar of water growing louder. Nita's lungs burned for air. Just as spots began dancing before her eyes, the ceiling lifted. They emerged into a larger chamber where she could swim properly, guiding the raft toward a faint light source ahead. "Hold tight," she gasped. "The falls come next." The current accelerated, pulling them inexorably toward a drop she could not yet see, but could hear and feel in the water's urgency. Nita scanned the walls desperately for handholds, finding none. "When we go over, curl into a ball," she instructed Keme. "The raft won't survive the fall, but it might break the water's surface for you." Terror and determination mingled in the boy's eyes. "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you," she promised, though she had no idea if either of them would survive. The river curved sharply, then suddenly there was nothing beneath them but air. They plummeted, the roar of the waterfall drowning Keem's cry. Nita lost her grip on the raft as they fell, tumbling through space before crashing into the churning pool below. The impact drove the breath from her lungs. She fought to the surface, searching frantically for Keem. Theria's small hand breaking the water's surface. 3 powerful strokes brought her to him. He was conscious but gasping, the medicine bundle still clutched against his chest. Nita pulled him to the rocky shore of an underground lake lit by a shaft of sunlight from a hole in the distant ceiling. They collapsed on the stone, trembling with cold and exhaustion. "We made it," Keme whispered in disbelief. A metallic click shattered their moment of relief. "Indeed you did. Impressive." The voice was cold, cultured, out of place in the ancient cavern. From behind a large boulder stepped a tall figure in a cavalry uniform. His red beard caught the dim light as he leveled a pistol at them. "Captain Bishop, I suspected you might survive the falls," he said conversationally. "These caves have many entrances. While my men pursued from above, I simply waited here." Nita pushed Keme behind her, reaching for her knife, only to find it lost in the river crossing. "The boy is all I really want," Bishop continued. "He's seen too much. You, however, I don't recognize." "She's nobody," Keme said quickly. "Let her go." Bishop laughed without humor. "Noble but unnecessary. Neither of you will leave this cave." "Why?" Nita demanded, playing for time as she assessed their options. "Because of mining claims on treaty land?" Surprise flickered across Bishop's face. "You know more than you should as well." His eyes narrowed. The Apache must be relocated. Progress demands it. The minerals beneath these territories will build the future. A future built on broken promises and the blood of children? Nita asked. Bishop shrugged. History is rarely comfortable for those on the wrong side of it. As he spoke, Nita noticed movement behind him, shapes emerging silently from a passage he hadn't secured. Apache warriors, their movements as fluid as water over stone. The Sky Knife Band had found another way into the cave system. There are many sides to history, Nita said, straightening to her full height, and many witnesses. Bishop registered the change in her demeanor too late. As he began to turn, the first warrior was already upon him. The pistol discharged harmlessly into the stone as it was knocked from his hand. In moments, Captain Bishop lay face down on the cave floor, disarmed and bound. The leader of the warriors, a tall man with a stern, weathered face, approached Nita and Kame. "The signal smoke saved our people," he said in Apache. "We followed when we saw you were pursued." He looked at Keme with interest. "This is the boy who survived the massacre?" "Yes," Nita replied, "and he carries knowledge that may save more than just your band." 3 moons had passed since the day in the cave. The summer sun warmed the high plateau where representatives from 5 Apache bands had gathered, the largest such meeting in a generation. Near the center of the encampment, Nita sat outside her newly constructed dwelling, grinding herbs with the same clay medicine bowl she had once left to gather dust. The evidence taken from Captain Bishop had reached not only tribal leaders, but sympathetic Indian agents and even a newspaper writer from the East. The conspiracy to relocate tribes from mineral-rich treaty lands had been exposed, creating enough outcry to force an official investigation. Bishop himself was now imprisoned, awaiting trial for the murder of Keem's grandfather and the massacre of his village. It wouldn't bring back the dead, but it had created an uneasy peace. The government's immediate plans had been delayed, giving the tribes time to organize their resistance through legal means rather than bloodshed. Nita looked up from her work as Keeme approached, proudly carrying a rabbit he had snared himself. In the months since their escape, the boy had thrived. Though still solemn beyond his years, he laughed more often now, especially when playing with other children who had accepted him readily into their games. "A fine catch," Nita approved. "Your snares are well made." Keeme beamed at the praise. "Walking Fox showed me how to set them in pairs," he said, naming one of the sky knife hunters who had taken an interest in teaching him. As Nita helped him prepare the rabbit for cooking, her gaze drifted to the special place on her dwelling wall, where a single eagle feather hung, not her husband's necklace, which still rested around her neck, but a new feather. It had been presented to Keem during a ceremony 3 days earlier, officially marking his adoption into the tribe, with Nita recognized as his mother. The adoption feather symbolized new beginnings, a continuation of bloodlines through bonds of the heart rather than the body. During the ceremony, Nita had spoken her children's names aloud before the assembled tribe, sharing the memory of Hakan and Tala publicly for the first time since their deaths. There had been no shame in her tears, no whispers of bad luck or death spirits, only respect for grief honored and healing begun. "The council meeting starts at sunset," Keme reminded her. "Standing Bear said I should be there since I'm the one who saw the papers." Nita nodded. "We'll go together." Life among people again had been an adjustment after years of solitude. At first, Nita had planned to return to her cliff dwelling once Keeme was safely established with the Sky Knife Band. But the boy had clung to her, and something in her had changed during their journey together. The walls she had built around her heart had crumbled, stone by stone. When the Sky Knife leader had offered her a place as a healer and Keme home as her son, she had found herself accepting before fully considering what it meant. Now, weeks later, she knew it had been the right choice. Her knowledge of plants and healing had already saved 2 children from fever and an elder from a venomous snakebite. People sought her wisdom now, not just her medicines. The cliff dwelling remained a special place, and Kame visited occasionally to gather specific plants that grew there, but it was no longer her home. That evening, as they walked together toward the council fire, Keem slipped his hand into hers with the casual confidence of a child who knows he is loved. Around Nita's neck hung both Tarak's eagle feather necklace and the eagle bone whistle that had saved their lives in the cave. The past and the present, joined by unexpected bonds. "Do you think the spirits sent me to your door that night?" Keme asked suddenly. "Grandfather always said there are no accidents." Nita considered this as they approached the circle of tribal leaders, waiting to begin the council. Once she would have dismissed such talk as superstition. Now she wasn't so certain. "Perhaps," she said finally, "or perhaps two broken pieces simply found each other and became whole again." Standing bare, the Sky-Knife leader motioned them forward to join the circle. As they took their places, the setting sun bathed the plateau in golden light, and for the first time in many years, Nita felt the full meaning of her own name, she who belongs. Not to a place, not to the past, but to this moment, this circle, this child who had knocked on her door during the season's worst storm and changed everything she believed about second chances.